Have you ever felt like you were invisible to the people who should have seen you the most? Like no matter how hard you tried, your efforts were nothing more than dust in the wind? Well, that's how I felt for as long as I could remember. Growing up, I was the odd one out in my family. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't the one everyone turned to for reassurance or validation. That role went to my sister, the perfect daughter, the one who was always a little more charming, a little more capable in everyone's eyes. But that all changed one day. One devastating moment that altered everything. I discovered something that I never thought I'd hear from my family. Something that shattered my world completely. Everything I thought I knew about loyalty, about trust, was gone. And that was the day I stopped being the good son. The day everything flipped. So, how does a son get back from that? Well, this is where my story begins. Family is supposed to be the place where you can always find support, right? It's where you're supposed to feel like you matter. But for me, that wasn't the case. The family business, worth $2 million, was passed down to my sister. She was the one who had always been praised. She had the right qualities, the leadership, the confidence that everyone expected from someone in charge. I, on the other hand, always felt like I was just there. I wasn't the one who received all the praise, all the recognition. I didn't fit into their expectations, no matter how hard I tried. And when the time came for my parents to make the big decision, there was no question. My sister was the one they saw as the future of the business. I stood there, watching, as they handed it all to her, the business that should have been shared, the legacy that could have been ours together, handed to her without hesitation. It felt like my dreams were ripped away in an instant, and it hit me. No matter what I did, I was always going to be the second choice, always in the background. But that's when I realized something. I didn't have to wait for them to choose me. I didn't have to stay in the shadows. I had a vision. I had ambition. And if they couldn't see that, I would prove them wrong. By building something of my own, something bigger, something that was mine. There are moments in life where everything just clicks, where you realize the path you've been walking on, the one you thought was set in stone, is no longer the one that feels right. I had spent my whole life trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me. And when my family handed the business over to my sister, I knew it was time to break away. The decision wasn't easy. In fact, it was terrifying. I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the experience. But there was one thing I had that I could never deny: my drive. I was determined to carve out my own place, to prove that I could succeed on my own terms, not because I inherited anything, but because I built it from the ground up. I remember the night I made that decision. I was sitting in my small apartment, staring at the city lights outside my window. The world felt so big, and I felt so small. But that's when it hit me. I wasn't going to let fear hold me back anymore. I wasn't going to be the one left behind. I was going to build something of my own. No more waiting for approval. No more asking for permission. So I started planning. Every night, I stayed up late, researching markets, making lists of goals, calculating risks. I had no backup, no safety net. It was all on me. And with every idea I wrote down, I felt a little more alive. It was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. The unknown felt like an adventure I couldn't ignore. The first step was raising money. That was the hardest part. I didn't have rich investors lining up at my door. I had to pitch my vision over and over again, each time with a bit more confidence, even though I was terrified on the inside. But when those first few investors came on board, it felt like I had just received the golden ticket. I started small, no giant office, no fancy meetings. I was working out of my apartment, making calls, doing the grunt work. And then, little by little, things started falling into place. My first deal came through. It was a small property, but it was enough to give me the confidence I needed. The clients came. The contracts started to roll in. And for the first time, I felt like I was finally doing something that mattered, not just for my family, but for me. But even as things started to look up, I knew that success wasn't just about building a business. It was about proving to myself that I could stand on my own 2 feet without the weight of family expectations. There was something satisfying about making my own decisions, seeing my ideas come to life. I was on the rise, yes, but as the business started to grow, I couldn't help but wonder, was this just the beginning, or was there something darker lurking just around the corner? Because when you're starting to succeed, you don't always see the dangers ahead, and I had no idea what was coming for me. I won't lie, the first few months were pure adrenaline. I felt like I was on top of the world, like everything I touched turned to gold. Each deal, each investment was like a new victory, pushing me forward into uncharted territory. It felt like the universe was aligning for me, like all the years I spent waiting, fighting for recognition, were finally paying off. I remember the first real milestone, the day I signed my first major deal. It was a commercial property, the kind of investment that could have made or broken my entire venture. I sat at that desk, pen in hand, my heart racing as I looked down at the contract. And as I signed my name, I realized something. I wasn't just securing a piece of property. I was securing my future. The moment that contract went through, everything changed. People started paying attention. Investors, who once shrugged me off, began to see potential in what I was building. I was no longer just the guy who'd been cast aside by his family. I was the guy, the one with a vision, the one who was making things happen. In the next year, things only escalated. I expanded into tech, then moved into real estate development, all while the business side of things began to grow exponentially. I kept reinvesting, kept pushing forward. The city, my city, started to know my name. I wasn't a forgotten son anymore. I was someone, but with every rise, there's always a shadow looming. It wasn't perfect, not by a long shot. There were days where I felt like I was running on fumes, barely staying ahead of the game. Every new deal, every new opportunity, felt like it could be my last. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The hunger was too strong, and the taste of success, sweet but fleeting, drove me harder. I remember one night, after closing yet another successful deal, I stood on the rooftop of my office building, looking out at the city lights below. I could hear the faint hum of the traffic, the pulse of the city, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged. I felt powerful, like I was finally on the same level as the people I once admired from afar. And it was in that moment that I realized I had made it, or so I thought. But like they say, when things seem too good to be true, they usually are. And I had no idea just how quickly everything could come crashing down. But for now, I stood tall, and nothing was going to stop me from claiming what was mine, or so I believed. Everything was going smoothly. At least, that's what I thought. The business was growing. New deals were being made. Things were finally looking up. But the higher you climb, the more you realize there are people waiting for you to slip. That's when Richard entered the picture. At first, he seemed like a dream partner, charismatic, well-connected, a sharp businessman who seemed to know exactly what he was doing. We made the perfect team. We complemented each other's strengths and weaknesses. I felt like I could trust him, with my vision, with my dream. But then, slowly, something shifted. I started noticing the small things, decisions made without me, contracts signed behind my back, promises broken. I tried to ignore it at first. After all, I was busy. We were both busy. But deep down, I knew something was off. And then, it all came crashing down in one moment. I opened the financial reports one morning, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Richard had been siphoning money from the business. Not only that, he had been manipulating the books, redirecting funds into his own pockets. The realization was sharp, painful, like being stabbed in the back by someone you trusted with your life. I felt sick. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted him so completely when all along he had been lying, deceiving, and slowly betraying me? Every decision I had made with him, every risk we took together, it all felt like a lie now. The anger surged through me, and I wanted to confront him. I wanted to walk right up to him, throw all the evidence in his face, and demand answers. But something stopped me. I knew if I confronted him in anger, I'd lose. I couldn't let him get away with it, not without getting my own hands dirty. So I made the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I bided my time. But what I didn't realize was that Richard's betrayal was just the beginning. He had a plan, one that would shake everything to its core, and I was too late to stop it. As I sat there, staring at the numbers that now felt like a graveyard for my dreams, I realized just how vulnerable I had made myself. I had trusted the wrong person, and now, my business, everything I had worked so hard to build, was hanging by a thread. The worst part? I didn't know if I could fix it. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. Everything I had worked for, the late nights, the sleepless weeks, the sacrifices, all of it came crashing down, faster than I could process. One moment, I was on top of the world, closing deals, making strides, feeling like nothing could touch me. But when the financial reports came in, the truth hit like a freight train. I stared at the numbers in disbelief. The debts, the loans, the unpaid invoices. It was like the floor had been ripped out from under me. The weight of it all, everything I thought I had secured, was gone, slipping away faster than I could keep up with. The phone started ringing. Calls from investors, clients, partners, all asking the same thing. What's going on? But I had no answers, no excuses, only the cold, hard reality that I had failed. I felt the panic set in, like a storm building in my chest. How had it gone so wrong? I had been so focused on pushing forward, so determined to prove myself, that I hadn't seen the cracks forming beneath the surface. The lies I had ignored, the red flags I had dismissed. Suddenly, they were all glaring back at me, impossible to ignore. But what hit hardest wasn't the money, or the failing business, or even the embarrassment of having to face my investors. It was the feeling of having lost everything I had worked for, only to realize I didn't even know where to start picking up the pieces. I had built something, yes, but it was built on shaky ground. And now it was all falling apart. I was stuck. There was no quick fix, no easy solution. And for the first time, I had to ask myself the hardest question of all. Could I recover from this? Could I rebuild? Or had I already lost too much? There's a moment when everything changes, when you realize you can't keep running from what's in front of you. I had spent so much time pretending everything was fine, even when deep down I knew it wasn't. I had ignored the signs, buried my doubts beneath ambition and pride. But then came the moment I could no longer avoid the truth. I remember sitting in my office late one night, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The walls, which had once felt like a fortress, now seemed like they were closing in. The financial disaster, the broken relationships, the empty promises, it all came rushing in, and I couldn't run anymore. I had built this empire, but it was built on a lie. It was built on my refusal to face the truth. The hardest part wasn't the failure itself. It wasn't the fact that everything was falling apart. The hardest part was knowing that I had been blind to it for so long. I had ignored the warning signs, the whispers of doubt that had been there all along. I had been too focused on proving myself, on chasing success at any cost. But now all I had were broken pieces, and I had to face that. There was no one to blame but myself. In that moment, I realized something profound. The only way to move forward, the only way to rebuild, was to stop lying to myself. I had to own up to every mistake I had made. I had to stop pretending that I could fix everything with more work, more effort. I had to acknowledge that I was human and that I had failed. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, looking at myself and admitting that I wasn't the person I thought I was. I had been chasing validation, chasing success to fill a hole I didn't even understand. And now I was staring at the wreckage of everything I had built, and I had to face the painful reality. It wasn't enough, but there was something else in that moment, something deeper than the regret. I realized that even though I had failed, I still had a choice. I could stay stuck in the past, wallowing in my mistakes, or I could use this as an opportunity to change, to rebuild, not just my business, but myself. The truth was painful, yes, but it was also freeing, because once you face the truth, you can start fresh. And that's what I intended to do. There's something about returning home after you've been away for too long. You can almost feel the weight of everything you've been avoiding hanging in the air. And for me, walking back through that front door felt like stepping into a place that was familiar, yet foreign. I hadn't been home in months, maybe longer. The business had consumed me. I was too wrapped up in my own struggle, too focused on proving myself to anyone who would listen. But in the end, what had I really proven? Nothing. And when everything fell apart, when I hit rock bottom, I knew there was only one place left to go: home. I stood in front of the door, hesitating. What would they think? What would they say? I had failed. I had messed up in a way I could never undo. But there I was, ready to face the people I had avoided for so long. My family. When my mom opened the door, I saw it in her eyes. The concern, the fear, the hope that maybe I hadn't lost myself completely. She didn't say anything at first. She just hugged me, And in that moment, I realized something. No matter what had happened, no matter how badly I had fallen, this was still my home. These were the people who would never leave me, even if I didn't deserve it. Dinner was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels loud because you know the weight of everything that's been unsaid. They were still trying to figure out what had happened, what went wrong, and I had no answers. I just felt empty. But then my father spoke up, his voice steady and calm. "You don't have to be perfect," he said. "You just have to keep going." Those words, simple as they were, hit me like a wave. I didn't need to explain everything. I didn't need to have all the answers. I just needed to show up. And that was the first step. It wasn't about fixing everything in one night. It wasn't about pretending like everything was fine. It was about rebuilding the trust I had lost, not just with my family, but with myself. And even though I felt broken, even though the business was in ruins, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. As I sat there with them, talking about small things, things that didn't matter much anymore, but felt important in that moment, I realized that I had been running away from this, from them, for far too long. And no matter how much I tried to build, no matter how many deals I made, nothing would ever compare to this. Coming back home and being accepted for who I really was, mistakes and all. It wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't a magical turnaround, but it was the beginning of something new. A new chance, a chance to rebuild, not just the business, but the relationships that mattered most. And that was worth more than any deal I'd ever made. When you've lost everything, it feels like the end. You're standing there, staring at the wreckage of all your hard work, feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. But there's a strange thing that happens when you hit rock bottom. You have two choices: stay down or find the strength to get back up. And in that moment, when everything was falling apart around me, I realized something. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let failure be the last word in my story. I wasn't going to just accept defeat. I had something left to prove, not to anyone else, but to myself. The first step was the hardest. I had to face my mistakes head on, the lies, the missed opportunities, the people I'd let down. I had to confront all of it. And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy. There were nights I couldn't sleep, replaying everything in my mind, wondering where it all went wrong. But at the same time, I knew I had to face it. I couldn't keep running from my past. I started small, reaching out to the people I had pushed away, the partners I had hurt, the investors I had failed. Apologies don't fix everything, but they were a start. It wasn't about trying to make up for everything. It was about taking responsibility, owning up to my mistakes. That was the first step in rebuilding. But it wasn't just about making amends. It was about finding my way again. I got back to the basics. I wasn't thinking about big deals or flashy success anymore. I was focusing on what really mattered, building a foundation I could stand on. A foundation of honesty, hard work, and respect. Day by day, things started to shift. It wasn't instant, but it was progress. The fear, the self-doubt, the shame. They didn't disappear, but they didn't control me anymore. Slowly, I found myself again. The hunger, the drive, the ambition. It was still there. But now, it was tempered with a sense of purpose, a sense of humility that I had never known before. And I realized something else. This wasn't just about getting my business back. It was about becoming the person I was meant to be, the person who could handle success and failure with the same level of grace. I wasn't trying to prove myself to anyone anymore. I was doing it for me. It wasn't easy, but I had learned that the road to redemption isn't paved with shortcuts. It's a long, difficult journey, but one that's worth taking. There's a moment in every fall where you have to ask yourself, can I really come back from this? And it's not just about rebuilding what you lost. It's about finding your way back to the people you've hurt along the way. The people who used to believe in you before you lost their trust. For me, that was the hardest part. It wasn't the empty office, or the financial mess, or the way my business was crumbling. No, it was knowing I had betrayed people who had given me their loyalty, their trust, their time. I had burned so many bridges that it seemed impossible to cross them again. But if I wanted any shot at redemption, if I truly wanted to rebuild, I knew I had to start there, with trust. I started small, a simple phone call here, an email there. I reached out to the people I had wronged, the partners I had promised the world to and failed to deliver. At first, the responses were lukewarm. Some ignored me, others simply didn't believe me. And I couldn't blame them. How could they? I had been the one who let them down. But I didn't stop. The hardest part wasn't the rejection. It was knowing that no matter how many apologies I gave, no matter how many promises I made, the road to regaining trust wasn't going to be quick. It was going to take time. It was going to take effort. And most of all, it was going to take action. I realized that words could only go so far. What mattered now was my consistency, my willingness to show up every day and prove, through my actions, that I wasn't the same person who had walked away from them before. I made sure that every deal, every contract, every word I spoke reflected that change. I didn't expect people to forgive me right away, and I didn't ask for it, but I needed them to see that I was trying. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I thought I would lose it all. Some people never came back, never trusted me again, and that hurt more than I expected. But then there were those who did. Slowly but surely, the relationships I had broken started to heal. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about showing that I could be better, that I could rebuild and become someone who deserved their trust again. And as I stood there, looking at the small wins I had started to build, I realized something important. Regaining trust isn't about being perfect. It's about being consistent. It's about being real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally on the path to being the person I always wanted to be. Not just in business, but in life. There's something powerful about the idea of a fresh start. It's like waking up from a long, dark night and seeing the sun rise for the first time. The air feels different, and you realize that everything that felt heavy yesterday is now lighter. But a new beginning doesn't come without its share of struggle. After everything had fallen apart, after the betrayals, the losses, the mistakes, I wasn't sure where to begin. The pieces of my past were scattered everywhere, and the thought of starting over seemed overwhelming. But I had learned something along the way. There's power in starting from scratch. There's strength in rebuilding. So I picked myself up and started from the ground level. I went back to the basics, the foundation. I wasn't in a rush to build an empire again. I knew better now. This time, it wasn't about speed. It was about creating something solid, something real, something that could stand the test of time. I started with the people who had always believed in me. Slowly, the clients I had lost, the partners I had pushed away, they began to come back. Not because I was suddenly rich again, or because I had a flashy office, but because I had earned their trust again. It was about the work I was doing now, the integrity, the long hours that no one saw. It was about showing them that I was in this for the right reasons now. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to quit, days when I felt like nothing would ever be the same. But then I remembered the words I had heard time and time again. Success doesn't happen overnight, and that's the truth. It's not the big, flashy moments that make success. It's the little steps, the quiet wins, the days when you choose to show up, even when you feel like the world is against you. And slowly, things began to shift, not because of some miracle, but because I was finally in the right mindset. I wasn't building for the applause. I wasn't building for anyone else's approval. I was building for myself. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that this was the real success. I wasn't aiming to get back to where I was. I wasn't chasing the old dream. I was chasing something better, a dream that was mine, built on the lessons I had learned, the mistakes I had made, and the people I had hurt along the way. This new beginning, it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that, I knew, was worth fighting for. We all have that image of success, don't we? The big house, the car, the recognition, the end goal that feels like it will somehow make everything fall into place. I used to chase that dream, thinking that once I reached it, everything would finally feel right. But when I got there, I realized something important. It wasn't what I expected at all. You see, once I had everything I thought I wanted, once I was successful by the world's standards, I found myself still feeling empty. The deals, the achievements, the flashy moments, none of them brought the peace I had imagined. Success, I learned, isn't about what you have, it's about who you become along the way. It's when I stopped chasing external validation, stopped trying to prove my worth to everyone else, that I began to see it. Real success is about finding purpose. It's about waking up every day and knowing that what you're doing matters, not because it gets you more followers or more money, but because it aligns with who you are and what you truly believe in. And here's the twist. True success isn't flashy, and it's certainly not quick. It's built slowly, with consistency, integrity, and honesty. It's about the small, everyday choices that shape you as a person. When I realized that, everything shifted. Success stopped being a destination and became a way of life, something I could cultivate day by day without the need for anyone else's approval. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I was simply living, working, growing, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. Because in the end, real success isn't about what you gain, it's about who you become. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that the journey never really ends. Sure, there are moments where we think we've hit the finish line, that we've crossed the hurdle, but then life throws something new at us. And that's the beauty of it, right? The journey doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. And that's why I want you to remember this. Wherever you are in your life right now, whether you're in the middle of a setback, facing a challenge, or maybe even feeling like you've lost your way, know this. This is just one chapter. It doesn't define you. What defines you is how you get back up, how you keep moving forward. Every failure, every mistake, it's all part of the journey that shapes who you become. I want to hear your story. What are you struggling with? What's the one thing that's holding you back? Share it in the comments below, and let's talk about it. Because this isn't just my story, it's yours too. We're all in this together, and the more we share, the more we learn, the more we grow. If you found something valuable in today's video, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned for more real stories about how we all rise after falling. Because the road to success, the road to growth, it's not a solo journey. We're in this together, and there's always more to learn. Keep going, no matter where you are. The best is yet to come.